Welcome to the Stray Pointers podcast, where seemingly ordinary people join us for extraordinary discussions. You're watching Season 3, Episode 5 of the Stray Pointers podcast. This episode was recorded on April 3rd, 2025. I'm your host, Jim Lawless. For more information about the show, including the show notes for this episode, please visit straypointers.com. Joining the show tonight is old school Atari BBS enthusiast Rob Sherman. Rob, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
So, Rob, I want to talk to you tonight about the BBS that you're running on an Atari that's emulated in the AWS cloud. Do I have that correct? Is that the way that that's working?
Okay. You got it correct. Actually, I'm running 3 boards at the moment. So a couple of restorations. The first being the Southern Amos BBS, which is running with AWS support. So basically as a middleware to help with all the things related to the telnet connection, and then hosting as a server, hosting the BBS. The 2 others that I'm running are on actual hardware. So there's a original version of Amos that's been enhanced that kind of mirrors a little bit more of what I built when I was, 9, 10 years old, right? The original fast Amos or famous Amos.
Mm-hmm.
And that's running on a 130XE with basic XE. Swap out the hardware every now and then, maybe an ultimate 1 megabyte in the 130XE or something further. But the other board is Nightlight, which was one of the original boards that was used by Atari themselves. So brought that restoration back, and that's being hosted on an 800XL.
Great. Well, why don't we start at the beginning? What were your first experiences in computing?
Yeah, so maybe not that dissimilar to other people, right? Commodore VIC-20 was the first shot.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't last very long. So, went through and, some basic programming. And actually, in school that, they had a lab for, a bunch of PET, CBM set up, tape drives, usual stuff, and, cut my teeth on that. But after the VIC, which was maybe just had it for maybe about 5 or 6 months, some of the buddies in the neighborhood all had Atari stuff. 800XL was hot, very, great looking machine. So we went and we swapped out at Toys R Us all the VIC and all the Commodore stuff, and got some store credit and bought all the Atari gear. And then it wasn't too far from that, started, utilizing the modem and getting connected with some of the local boards.
Now, did you go right into hosting a BBS, or did you actually play games and do some coding and things like that?
Yeah, I was never really a big game player. So more interested in coding. So, especially small, efficient code programs like the 10-line program, contest that we have these days.
Mm-hmm.
Love that kind of stuff where you can squeeze as much as you can into, short programs, run those out. Really, from a game perspective, I had an Atari 2600. So if I wanted to play, a bad version of Pac-Man or something like that, always had that available.
Mm-hmm.
But now used to sit down at the 800XL and just crank out programs. Always was interested in how I could take not just small efficient code and make it do something pretty slick, but how I could make it talk to another machine. Once we started getting, beyond the 1030, modem, things started to become a little bit more interesting.
How did you happen upon BBSing and BBS communities?
Yeah, one of my neighbors ran one of the hottest boards in New York. It was called the Bandits Hideout, and used to go over there and swap wares. I don't know, you remember back in the day, you take your
Sure.
disk drive, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Everybody would go and hang out, and we'd swap wares. And the Bandits Hideout it ran on Forum, I think it was Forum XL, and it had an incredible library of downloads. But you were restricted. You could only do like 5 downloads right a week, or 10 if you had really good access. But we used to go over to Sean Cullen, that was the SysOp, the bandit, and we used to go over to his place and just copy everything that we could get our hands on. And once we started logging into his board and started moving around a little bit more on the local dial-up boards, things like Amos were very prevalent. There was a board called Alternate Reality. There was another one that was the Iron Curtain. And what really drew me to BBSing and sysopping wasn't necessarily, the social aspect at first. It was more of the creative, because I really was good at developing, designing, and just deploying ASCII graphics. I felt like that palette really did a great job, and it lent into something that I really had a passion for.
Okay, so what was the genesis of you hosting your first BBS then?
Yeah, I downloaded a version of Fast Amos, and this was no password file, single, message board, very basic functionality. I mean, it had maybe 10 commands on it, but to start the workings of the code and understand how all of the call ups to the modem worked, how you could build a ring detector on the joystick port, some of the engineering things that you had to do as a 9 or a 10-year-old, that you walk in the Radio Shack, you buy a relay, you get some wire together and take apart a joystick, and the next thing you know, when the phone rings, the BBS software would pick up, connect the phone line, and in this
Oh,
basic form, it really worked out well as experimentation.
so
And so,
so let me step back here. So the way that this
sure.
worked is in order for the phone to answer, you had to hit fire on a joystick normally, right? Is that the way that that
Right.
worked? So you
Yeah,
wired up a relay to that so that when the phone rang, it simulated someone firing the joystick and then it picked up
exactly.
the phone. That's
Yeah.
how did you happen upon that at your age?
Well, it wasn't new. There were all these great docs on BBSs before, like it would teach you like how to make a pipe bomb, or how to
Sure.
build
Life
something
skills.
specific, right?
Sure.
Life skills, yeah. How to start a fire. And one of them was, one of these great tech docs was, how to build the ring detector, because it wasn't just a problem for me that the 1030 Atari modem didn't have auto answer on it. It was a problem for a lot of systems operators. So
Hmm.
anyway, it gave you part numbers, it gave you a diagram, light schematic on how it would work. And yeah, sure enough, you take the two hot wires on the phone line. Not that anybody today knows what a phone line is,
Sure.
but you put that into the relay, two other prongs on the joystick port, and the code essentially was looking for whether that fire button was triggered. So I think it was like trigger 0, and when it would hit that, it would throw a command to the 1030. 1030 would make the handshake.
Wow. Now
Yeah,
you didn't stick with a 1030 modem though.
no. Went to MPP because it had auto answer, and Amos had a version for MPP, which is pretty good. And we started building out on that. But still, we're now talking where MPP would move up to 450 baud versus the 300. That stuck around for a little while, and then we moved on to 1200 pretty quickly, and then upwards to, I don't think I got past 2400 baud. Because by the time it was like, call it 1989 or so, we were already moving on, to ST, and 64-bit.
Now, how long did you run the Southern Comfort BBS?
Yeah, so it was a little over 4 years.
From when to when?
Yeah, so I'm gonna call it 86 to about 90,
Okay.
85 to, yeah.
And on average, how many callers did it get?
Yeah, about 35, 40 callers a day, which
Wow.
is really different than what we get now. I mean, Southern Amos gets maybe about 12 callers on average per day. The
Hmm.
two other boards maybe get an average of 6 to 8.
Okay. And why did you decide to get out of BBSing at
Yeah,
the
it was just
time?
like Yeah, it was a little bit of a switch, in hobby, I guess. A bunch of the guys that were running boards locally, they were moving away. They were going to college and moving on. It started to die down a little bit, of course, because you started to have CompuServe and Prodigy and all of the other right dial up for internet, and just with the change to PC and the change to even Apple, 8-bit wasn't as exciting to people anymore. And you could start to see it, completely tick down. I mean, I think the week before we took the board down, I think maybe we had two or three calls, and just made the decision to pack it up, and kept the phone line for a while with a nice reminder message on it, forwarding them to go and call the Bandits Hideout, which was still up. But for the most part, yeah, that's about where it ended in right before the 90s.
Now, you mentioned having an ST. Did you stay with the Atari hobby for a while?
Yeah. So I still have Mega ST2, still use that. Actually, that's great for gameplay, especially I'm stuck on Dragon's Lair, but 8-bit is almost my daily driver. But no, I stuck with it. I mean, there were years where time went by, pull out a 2600, or pull something out just to fire it up and make sure that it's working. But
Mhm.
right around 2019, I started recollecting stuff and rebuilding some of the inventory that I had, picking up a 130XE, picking up an 800, some disk drives, and started bringing things back.
And then
Nostalgia.
and then the pandemic hit.
And then the pandemic hit, and I had all this great stuff laying around, and a bunch of time to do, the hobby.
So tell me about the second life of Southern Comfort BBS.
Yeah, it was amazing because I kind of like picked up right where I left off from being a kid, and found this small community of people that were still dialing up boards. I didn't know that sync term existed, right? To get Atari emulation and to start dialing up telnet. Once I found that, that was it. I was going over to Basement BBS. There's the Boot Factory. There's Alcatraz. Those systems operators and myself were really close. We do regular calls together. Well, we try to do regular calls together, but we visit each other's boards daily. We keep things going. But because that small community was there, it was easy to say, how do I investigate a way to be able to put the board up without me, spending all day and all night doing the maintenance on it? Find a simpler way, right? Enjoy BBSing, enjoy putting up and hosting a board, but not necessarily have all the labor behind it that it once was. Boards would crash
Hmm.
regularly because the modem conflict, or the phone not connecting, or somebody hanging up. How can I make something that's bulletproof, essentially, and enjoy it, even though I like things when they break to fix them? I mean, that's part of it. But how can I get something reliable? Because today, if the board doesn't run, people stop calling, they figure it's down, right? So 99% uptime is an important factor. So anyway, the group of systems operators and all of us getting together and experience sort of a resurgence that was starting to happen. I figured, why don't I put up a board? Let's see what I can do with it. Got really crafty and creative, but constantly rebuilding the screens, making it a different experience, almost week after week, month after month, and then putting up a really good website to explain the story, to explain, how the technology works, provide access to it, and make it easy enough for people to connect. And then followed by that, not too far after, was FujiNet.
Oh, sure.
And yeah, that really helped to get some callers, that helped to get people utilizing their native hardware and getting them to use the 850 and the end device portion of FujiNet to dial into some BBSs.
Great. So how did you land on hosting this as an emulated Atari in AWS?
Yeah, so I mean, I looked at this and I'm like, how much do I want to expose my private network to the world? And done a lot of work in creating RPA, meaning process automations for finance and accounting. I
Hmm.
use quite a bit of QuickSight and AWS for analytics. And so it's very familiar to me to go and stand up a VM and utilize an external IP address. It just made sense. And so I stood up a version of Server 2000, like the free version, because an Atari emulator doesn't need much on
Hmm.
memory or hard drive space
Hmm.
and so on. And just started playing around with Altera, but then also working with John Polka, who runs the basement BBS. We wanted to find sort of this middleware that would work with telnet, that would sort of tunnel the telnet connection, and it would give a busy BBS notification, say if somebody was on the board.
Hmm.
That middleware helped us to be able to resolve a lot of problems with hosting a BBS reliably, and it also allowed us to be able to do things in remote computing, but also local. Meaning you could host the tunnel on one PC from a different IP address, but push everything through to the BBS that's hosted, say, either on real hardware or hosted in the cloud. So it just made sense to put all of the bot traffic and all of the scanners and so forth, put that with AWS, keep my private network safe, and have the
Sure.
ability to be able to remote connect into it and do maintenance and so on.
Sure. Now, how large is your caller base right now?
You know, I I think we've got like a little over 150 members that rotate out. Some people call every day. Other people once a week, once a month. The message bases are really active, which is great because there's awesome conversations that are happening. Everybody's got a project going on. There's always something new to discuss. It's very much the conversations that we had years back, right? So somebody being really witty, fixing a particular problem, asking questions, finding a better solution, and of course, putting up software for download or sharing software that makes the experience better.
Okay. If you don't mind, why don't we take a look?
Yeah.
I have sync term fired up here, so let me see if I can share that. Okay. I am gonna hit Window F2. I thought I was. You know what? This isn't gonna let me show my it's eating my Alt keystrokes here, my window keystrokes. So give me just a second here. There we go. Well, I guess we're just gonna go right into this. I was gonna show the screen that showed my settings. In sync term, you can set it for, there's a couple of Atari settings that you can set up so that you can do the a TASCII emulation and all that sort of thing, as you mentioned earlier. That's what I have this configured for. So let's just see if we can just go right into the Southern Amish. And I have this set up for 1200 baud emulation right now, so it didn't go by too quickly.
Right. Yeah. It goes as high as 96. The great thing about working this with this program now is that you just open the throttle, because the terminal program, whether it's sync term or even native bob term, let's say, it'll control the speed for you.
So if you see syntax error on your board spelled incorrectly, that's me.
Oh, good. Yeah, I like designing things like this, the drippy letters, a
Hmm.
little bit here of like component work. And then the modem was always a staple of my designs. The ability to be able to do break movies, right? That motion in the TASCII to show the flicker of the lights makes the experience a little bit more old school.
Okay, very reminiscent of the old days here.
Yeah. There's
Okay.
some great stuff that's really nostalgic. If you hit V, this is
Uh,
where all the Ataski cartoons are stored.
okay.
So back in the day, there were guys that, I mean, they must have labored over this stuff. Just, it's so intense, like the amount of work, every little character change was recorded in, in these break movies. And so like there were guys like Tim, for example, he'd make these full length like movies that they would run for, anywhere between 2 or 3 minutes and tell out a full story. Um, these graphics and things that come from like these are some ASCII retro art things. Uh, I've taken also some of the print shop icons and pulled them in, really creating more of a little theater experience with some of the movies because people, they hit me back after watching those. They're like, I watched that when I was like 8 years old, Infiltrator or Star Wreck or something to that effect. And
Hmm.
after they watch those, they're like, man, that was just incredible. I remembered it just like it was yesterday.
Now, which one of these might be the shortest one to see here?
Well, actually, hit enter. So we'll take you back to hit V. And you're going to want option number 2 here for the Ataski tunes. Yeah, the break movies.
Okay.
And then short and sweet at 1200 baud. That's a good question. So, uh, well, we could always hit Control X. Why don't you pick up, let's do number 4. That's always a good one. Lawrence of Albania. And yeah, this is TJD is the artist here. But yeah, you can see how it's going to lay out and it's going to push the story, going across the Sahara. Can't imagine the time that I mean, this must have been like 4 weeks, 5 weeks worth of work for somebody to to do this. So yeah, really interesting.
Wow. And
Shop ringing.
is this a popular feature on your board?
Yeah, message base is the first. These Tasking movies become second. There's a couple of games that I've been able to build into this platform. Nothing really crazy like a 3D maze game, which is, takes up some time, some trivia and stuff like that. But for the most part, the message bases are where most people spend their time.
Okay, we're gonna
And
log
then
off here.
there's
Oh,
downloads, of course. But
I
yeah,
I better take a look at those first. I
so it'd be
suppose I suppose I have to browse the file room first, huh?
B for browse. Yeah. All the staples here, gotta have Goonies, Donkey Kong, Pitfall. But it's so funny, and especially if you use native hardware where you turn on like say 850 Express or Bob Turn
Hmm.
and you download a file. People just tell me I remember watching it, line by line of these packets going by at 300 baud, and again, just so much that we took for granted back in the day, but today it means a lot to people. The fact that this stuff is still running, even that most of the Atari hardware is still running, is just incredible
Hmm.
and improving too. I mean, you got so many people that are creating enhancements for it. So
Yeah, we had Tom Cherry Holmes on the show here about a year ago, and he talked a bit about FujiNet. I need to get him back on.
yeah, they have taken that platform and moved it across PC, RS-232. They've moved it to the 2600. They've done a fantastic job of platform and community. I mean, they've brought together quite a bit of people to work on
Hmm.
it, which is, that's the best part of the Atari community, whether it's BBSing or it's hardware or FujiNet or software. people really come together on it.
So Rob, what's in the future for you and BBSing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still restoring a couple of different boards. I just picked up original versions of the discs for Carina 2 and Forum MPP. I'm going to try and get a board running with an MPP modem for dial-up. See if that does anything. There's still so many people that are still using dial-up. It's amazing, but it's the most authentic way, right?
Sure.
Um, I'm doing a program that started about 2 years ago with the guys from Antic. Don't toss those floppies. So I'm archiving and taking floppies, converting them into ATRs, and spending time with the preservation projects and making sure we've got documentation, we've got all the software, and not so much the commercial software, the things that came off of BBSs and the things that were built in utilities, the things that as kids we built that shouldn't be lost to time.
Hmm.
Um, the commercial stuff everybody's got, but the things that we created, there's literally tens of thousands of them, little widgets, small basic programs, compiled programs that we're collecting, archiving, documenting, and keeping that forward.
Very good. Is there anything you wanted to cover tonight that we didn't?
I think we covered it all. You got my whole childhood. I still have. This is still my whole childhood. I don't believe I've moved past 12. Don't
Well,
let the
Rob,
seriousness fool you.
Rob, it was great having you on the show.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all for watching today's show. Let's do this again soon. Take care.